Hi everyone, it's Karen Cole from Legal Mind Friends. Welcome, and we're going to talk about is the DA's DNA problematic? And we're going to look at Familia DNA matching, what it all has to do with law enforcement, and it's going to be really exciting. I'm going to make a kind of complicated subject exciting because I found a really good research paper on gov.uk. So let's get started. In September of 2020, gov.uk published a research paper in which they analysed should we be making use of genealogy to assist in solving crime. And they premised this report for those who are involved in the criminal justice system. So I'm going to read you some of the report, kind of like the highlights, and then we're going to look at a clip from Duty Ron, and then we're going to look at another clip from the UK where they did use this process to catch somebody, a criminal, a really bad criminal. So stick around, and I'm sure you're going to be just as intrigued as I was. So they highlight that this process became prominent for the search of the suspect in the Golden State killings in California, USA. And ultimately, because of this, he was caught for 13 murders. So I'm going to play a short clip from a documentary from the UK where they did use this process to catch a really bad person, criminal. So let's watch that and then I'll come back.
These two crimes became known as the Bedsit murders, but despite extensive investigations, no suspect was identified and the case eventually went cold. Advances in DNA testing meant that police forces were revisiting cold cases, sometimes decades old, in order to try and identify suspects. This analysis linked the killer of Wendy Nell and Caroline Pierce, but this did not match anyone on the national database. However, by 2019, there had been the emergence of familial DNA searches, whereby the police were able to compare the DNA to known offenders who were on the database for similarities, which would suggest the unknown offender was a relative. From there, they would then focus on the family and take samples of all males to see if any of them were an exact match. The closest match was Fuller's brother, whose DNA was added to the police database in 2012, and this fact and further inquiries led the police to Fuller's door.
If you want to watch that full documentary, I've left all the links below. So the research points out that the genetic database for genealogy that provide direct consumer genetic testing to the public are 23andMe, Ancestry DNA, MyHeritage, and Family Tree DNA. And there will be several others once the cost of testing goes down and there's greater public interest. And the companies that provide genetic information is limited. 23andMe and Ancestry DNA and MyHeritage do not allow it without a warrant. So let's listen to an expert from Crime Time with Duty Ron and Ed Wallace.
First, I want to dispel the myth that we use Ancestry or 23andMe. That was in that news clip, and it's absolutely wrong. We do not. Nobody has been successful with a subpoena against Ancestry or 23andMe. Right. Somewhere on Ancestry's website, they are proud to list the number of subpoenas they fought off during the year to get their data or get into their database. So we don't use those. We use 23andMe and Family Tree DNA only because that's the only way we can do it.
So yes. So what happens is, like, people go to 23andMe and Ancestry.com and they do their profiles in there, but they don't cross-link. They don't share information. So people can take their profile from 23andMe and Ancestry.com and then go to GED or Family Tree and upload their profile into those databases. And where the GED database tells everybody up front, hey, we share our database with law enforcement.
Family Tree is a for-profit company that's been around for 20 years. And once you are in their database, you are required to opt in. Well, you're not required. Let's say that's the default. And very few people, opt out, because if you opt out and you don't let law enforcement use data, you have to leave the platform. You can't use any of their services. Some of the people have had their data there for 20 years.
So this research paper found that Family Tree DNA has over 1 million contributors, and they have been collaborating with the FBI for some time. And because of this, when people found out, there was a lot of criticism from their customers. So once it became known that they were sharing profiles with law enforcement, this created a problem. So to address this, they offered an opt-out option. However, not many contributors use this because probably they didn't really know about it. And other than the European users who have been automatically opt-out in line with EU laws. In Europe, the users have to actively consent to law enforcement, so they have to opt in. So GED match has been reported to be mostly used in the United States, and they clarify the scope of crimes that their database will be used, and their customers must give authorization, meaning that they have to opt in to allow law enforcement to use it. What's interesting is that the report that we're reading noted that GED match was taken over by Verigen in 2019. So my question would be, where are all those authorizations? Did they authorize to the new company? So what happened with them? And that's some food for thought. What are the other challenges? There needs to be sufficient quantity of high quality DNA collected from a crime scene. And to test it, it cannot be too degraded. And what they're saying is that once the crime scene DNA gives a potential link to a person found, a comparison is done with the standard STR-based DNA, which entails obtaining a reference sample from the suspect. And in USA, police can obtain this from a discarded item. The question would be, could this method be acceptable in the UK? When the evidence against a suspect is limited to genealogical links. That's unclear. This is what the report is saying. The other issue they point out is that to find a match depends significantly on if there's a large database of individuals ideally associated with genealogical information, and 35% of testing may be unsuitable as they may not share DNA with relatives, even though they may genealogically be related. So what they're saying is that if the perpetrator of the crime is not of Western European origin, then the chances of getting a successful match is going to be limited because they are underrepresented. And they point out that the cost is about £4,000 to £4,000 to about $5,000. That was in 2020. I don't know if it's gone up since then. And it says that it takes about 24 hours to find a match, but to find a match for a cousin may only take a couple of hours. So they point out that Familia DNA searching in the UK has been used since about 2003 in serious crimes, where there is a DNA STR, which means short tandem repeat. And this is because there's about 99.9% of our DNA is the same as everyone else's. So it's the need to distinguish between individuals is tricky. So since 2012, the UK has done 120 cases that have been authorized for Familia DNA searches, of which have resolved through this approach, and a further 14 by other means. And the success rate is about 20%. And the suggestion is that genealogy could assist with the remaining. So I hope that makes sense. The other issue they're pointing out is that DNA profiles need to be collected from suspects and from convicted individuals. The example they give is that the Golden State killer could have been identified many years prior to 2017, because if the Golden State killer's brothers, he was already a convicted felon, and if his DNA would have been in the database, then they could have done a Familia search first, and that would have most likely identified him with links a lot sooner. So that's quite interesting. So the other issue that they're pointing out is that the process needs to be regulated. And this is a concern. For example, I know my parents did a genealogical family tree, and they just had to send in, I think, a couple of swabs of their saliva or something like that, and provide it to a private company. So, where's the chain of custody if they're going to be using these companies that have all this? Does that make sense? And I'm guessing that the defense for the accused, Bryan Kolhburger, also wants to know about all these concerns that we've been pointing out. Was there an opt-out or an opt-in to allow law enforcement to get to use the Familia DNA link matching? What is the chain of custody? What are the security measures in place? So, what's your thoughts? Don't forget to check out all the links in the description area if you want to watch the full documentary from the UK. If you want to watch Crime Time with Duty Ron, they go into it a lot more with Ed Wallace, as he's an expert in this field. And then there is the government research paper. I've also left it in the description area below. So please don't forget to like and share, as it helps this channel to grow. And I hope this has given you some food for thought as to why the defense may be asking all these questions about how the DNA was recovered. Well, I hope you found today's video interesting, and information is power. Why not subscribe and watch more of our videos? If you need legal help, contact Legal Minded Friends.